This is where I left off in the last lecture. So I just kind of want to backtrack a little bit since, again, we've had all this overwhelming amount of information and new, very maybe difficult things to grasp for some of you who are just being exposed to all this. So again, we remember that the Aryan invasions of this civilization, which prior to that had civilizations such as the Harappan civilization, and I hope by now that you watched the link on the discussion of the Aryans in India that I have from the my history lab in the text, in the e-text. That's really helpful in kind of discussing some of the theories about the Aryan conquest or not, or how it plays into modern Indian politics as well. In any case, the Vedic culture that arises with these texts, as I mentioned, helps us get some insights into cultural ideas about this civilization. We know that India is named after the Indus, and we also discussed that there was a caste system, right? That you had priests, noble warriors. You have people on the lower end that were considered untouchables, that were seen to be destined to do only menial labor. And as a side note, on a cultural level, the caste system still does have a place within India, even if not in a legal way. Just like racism in America, abolishing slavery and segregation doesn't put an end to long-standing issues like this, right? And so then you have, I discussed that Hinduism is a difficult term to define, that there's all of these different religious texts, the Upanishads, Puranas, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and they do different things. They address different types of things, and they appeal to different aspects of Hindu society. And out of these various texts emerge variations on the religion that use similar language and ideas, but would be a whole different way of practicing their religion, right? And so I talked about how some focus just their worship mainly on Vishnu, other ones focus more on Shiva, and they and if you remember right, I also discussed how, even though that there is a Hindu writer that said that there was 330 million gods, which is probably an exaggeration, but that they could simultaneously consider themselves monotheists, because all of these gods are mere manifestations of the ultimate reality, right? And so what happens is, for many Hindus, is they focus on one deity that they like as that manifestation of God is the one that they favor and see as the best manifestation of that ultimate reality. And so, I don't know, I think that it could be, in a certain sense, like, I talked about the Christian Trinity, and I talked about that the Hindus have a Trinity as well. But imagine that there's one group of Christians that wanted to mainly focus on the Father, and the other one that mainly wanted to focus on Jesus, but all seeing that the Trinity was true, but their focus was more on one than the other. And I think that Hinduism could get even more variety out of it than that. So that's what makes it difficult to pin down, is we're used to, when you come out of a monotheistic tradition that is more straightforward, there's really just one way. There's a one way to do things for Islam and for Christianity and Judaism, right? And to see that kind of wide variety to coexist for so long is very odd. I think that the conceptualization that the Hindu world has just really is so different than those traditions. But Christians and Muslims and Jews have survived in India for some time, and I'm sure there was a little bit easier understanding of that, or not. Just because you live next to people doesn't mean that you actually take the time to understand them, right? Unfortunately. Okay, so I'm hoping I helped recap that. Now, I talked about the Mahabharata being the longest poem in the world. I think it was like, what, 100,000 couplets or stanzas, and telling stories within Hindu society. I wanted to end here. I'm going to end this last lecture on this section a little shorter, but I wanted to talk about the Bhagavad Gita. This is a very important text. For Gandhi, the gospel, that is right, the Christian gospel, in particular the Sermon on the Mount of Jesus, and the Bhagavad Gita were his two most important texts that he stated that influenced his life. And for the Hare Krishnas, a religion that you may or may not come in contact if you go to hippie gatherings or fish concerts or college campuses in urban settings. Their worship is focusing on Krishna as the ultimate God to worship. In any case, it's a famous story, and it's a small portion that comes out of the Mahabharata. Okay, and it's an interesting story because what you have is the context is there's a civil war, and in the civil war it has happened what we had in the United States Civil War: cousins killing cousins, people ending up being on a family, people who are related being on opposite sides of a battle. And that is a tragedy of all civil wars, right? And so Arjuna is leading this battle, and he's in his chariot, and he looks out, and as they stand there, they stare down each other. He looks at the other side, and he sees people he knows, family. And his heart sinks. And he says, I can't do this. Now, interestingly, Krishna manifests himself into the chariot with Arjuna in this chariot. And he essentially tells him, and I'm paragraphing, look, I see that you're faint-hearted, but you're a Kshatriya. You're a military man, and your destiny is this. And you can't start a battle that you're not going to finish. This is what you came out here to do, and your duty is important. And keep in mind that there is reincarnation, there is dharma, that all things die, and that we all are to fulfill our roles. And in this circle of life, we kind of end up basically where we're supposed to be anyways. That's my little paraphrase of Krishna's argument. And so essentially he talks him into, hey, stop being selfish. It's not about you. Go fight. Do the war. Now, this might seem strange that Gandhi, who was into pacifism, saw this as an important text. But just like our own texts, there's military battles in the Bible that are quite violent. And I point out all the time that my parents were hippie pacifist Christians, and they named me after the most violent guy in the Bible, Joshua. How can that be? I think we always have to remind ourselves that when we read texts, we impose something that we're seeing, and then other people see another lesson to be drawn from it. For Gandhi, this was metaphorical, or there's like the fleshly desire type of thing, and then there's actually breaking free from that and transcending our will, so to speak, our impulses. So in other words, a war text is turned into a pacifist text. So when it comes to looking at Islamic text or Christian text or Buddhist text, we can always see, or any other text, you can see so many things to justify war and killing, and at the same time you have many, many people who read these things in a very opposite light. And so as a historian, I always want to warn you, and we have to warn ourselves all the time as historians, that we don't just trust that the stories that we see or observe tell us precisely about a given civilization, because sometimes we impose the way we want to see it mean on the text, and we're missing the point. And it's also fair to say that sometimes the way that contemporary people from their own civilization may look at the text differently than their own civilization did in the past. So it's never as straightforward that just reading something that's translatable, or even in the original language, that we're actually always getting the precise intended meaning that was originally intended. Okay, I'll end it here. I guess my lecture didn't end up turning so short after all.